That night, a boy in a military uniform lay on the operating table. It was December 2016, in the underground third floor of the 105th Hospital. On the outskirts of Pyongyang. I was standing in a place where I was never supposed to be. My name is Park Jin-hee, a nurse officer of the Korean People's Army. I was 28 years old at the time. From that night on, my life would never be the same. "Comrade, what are you doing here?" The guard's voice echoed down the corridor, and the syringe in my hand began to tremble. "I came to get blood pressure medicine for the patient in room 3, I answered. It was a lie. In reality, I had opened a door that was never meant to be opened. Behind that door, the state's deepest secrets were hidden. Inside, there was a boy who looked about 15. He was wearing a military uniform, but his face was deathly pale, and his arms were covered in needle marks. In the beds beside him lay other children, just like him. They all wore the same expression, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "What is this?" My voice shook as I asked. The senior nurse answered coldly. "Don't ask questions. You signed the security pledge, didn't you? Whatever you see down here, you never saw it. Remember that." That night, for the first time in my life, I became afraid of the word motherland. I had graduated at the top of my class from the Military Medical University. I had sworn absolute loyalty to the party. And yet, from that day on, every time I closed my eyes, those children's faces floated up in the darkness. It felt like I couldn't breathe. This story is the truth I risked my life to smuggle out to the outside world. Please, I ask you, listen until the end. Because this is the reason I am still alive. In the spring of 2014, I graduated from the Military Medical University in Pyongyang. My father was a senior staff officer at the corps level. My mother worked in party administration. Our family was what people called of good songbun, good political background. From childhood, I was taught that being born and raised in Pyongyang was a blessing, a privilege. I believed those words without the slightest doubt. The 105th Hospital was hidden in the mountains on the outskirts of Pyongyang. It was not an ordinary military hospital. From the entrance, there were 3 layers of security checkpoints: ID checks, entry passes, fingerprint scanners. CCTV cameras watched every corridor. Even the lockers of us nurse officers were inspected almost every week. "Comrades, we will now begin the morning study session." Every morning at 8, we had political study. We read the teachings of comrades Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un out loud. We denounced the atrocities of American imperialism. We condemned the puppet regime in South Korea. Dozing off was not allowed. The group leader wrote down the names of anyone who nodded off. If your name appeared on that list, you had to stand before everyone at the party life review and criticize yourself in front of the group. There was a strict hierarchy even inside the hospital. General wards, wards for high-ranking cadres, and then the place we called the special ward. The special ward was underground. Who was hospitalized there? What kind of treatment they received? No one knew. Or rather, no one dared to know. Even asking was dangerous. "Pak, your name's on the roster for night duty in the special ward." At those words from my senior, my heart skipped a beat. Working in the special ward meant handling highly classified security matters. Before you could even go down there, you had to sign a written pledge. All matters witnessed during duty hours are classified as state secrets. Any leakage to the outside will be punished as treason. My hand trembled, but there was no option to refuse. On the first night of my duty, in the elevator going down to the basement, I kept repeating to myself, I am working for the motherland. I am serving the people. But the moment the elevator doors slid open, I realized this was no hospital. It was a prison. On both sides of the corridor, heavy iron doors lined the walls. Each door had a small peephole window. Through those tiny windows, I did not see patients. I saw people who looked like prisoners. That night, when I returned to the dormitory, I cried for the first time in my life without worrying who might see me. But I didn't want my roommate to notice. So I pulled the blanket over my head and swallowed my sobs in the dark. Even crying was something I had to be careful about. The change began with a single USB flash drive. In the summer of 2016, a senior doctor, who had just come back from a trip to China, secretly slipped it into my hand. Whatever you do, don't get caught with this. And don't you dare say you got it from me. My hands shook as I took it. Inside were South Korean dramas and news broadcasts. That night, I hid in a bathroom stall in the dormitory. Plugged in my earphones, turned the volume down as low as it would go. And pressed play, hardly daring to breathe. The soul on the screen was a shock beyond anything I had imagined. Blinding neon lights, people laughing freely, markets where you could choose and buy what you wanted. It was nothing like the starving South Korean puppets we had been taught about all our lives. So they lied to us. The words slipped out of my mouth before I knew it, and even I was startled by what I had said. Everything I had believed without question for 28 years began to crack and crumble. They had always told us we lived in the happiest nation on earth. But in reality, the hungry ones were us. They taught us, over and over. We live thanks to our great leader. Yet in the back alleys I saw people secretly sharing a little sack of flour just to survive. And little by little, the truth about the special ward began to surface as well. Their test subjects, guinea pigs for new drugs. A drunk senior nurse muttered one night. I pretended not to hear, but my ears caught every word. Who do you think they're going to test the army's new medicine on? Kids dragged out of the political prison camps. They're going to die anyway. In that moment, I felt as if the whole world had collapsed beneath my feet. From that day on, I also started listening to the radio in secret. At 3 in the morning, under my blanket, I carefully turned the dial, shifting the frequency bit by bit. Through the static, a voice finally came through. This is Free Chosen Radio. To our brothers and sisters in North Korea. What followed were testimonies from defectors. The reality of political prison camps. Public executions, forced labor. Truths we had never been told. No, truths we had chosen not to see. Were being laid bare, one after another. My heart felt like it was going to tear apart. I'm part of this too. I'm one of the perpetrators. Every time I injected a needle in the special ward. Every time I wrote something in a chart. I was functioning as a cog in that system. Pretending not to know was also a crime. I began to feel as if my hands were stained with invisible blood. One day, I locked eyes with a boy in the corridor. He looked about 16. Miss, when can I go home? He asked. I couldn't answer, because for that child, there was no such thing as home. The political prison camp was his home. And this place was the last stop on his journey. That night, I made up my mind. I have to get out of here. I have to tell the outside world what's happening. I have to survive. I was terrified, but I could no longer go on living as a co-conspirator. Preparing to escape North Korea is something no one can do alone. At the beginning of 2017, I finally found the courage to trust one senior doctor, Dr. Ri. He had also traveled back and forth to China and had seen the outside world with his own eyes. He was struggling with the same doubts I had. I want to get out too. But alone? It's impossible, he said. At night, we met in the bathroom, speaking in whispers. If we cross the border along the Tumen River, the security is a little weaker. But we'll need a broker. Brokers, people who help you escape in exchange for money. Could we really trust them? If they betrayed us, we would be sent to a political prison camp. And not just us. Our families would be dragged in under guilt by association. We started saving money, not North Korean won. What we needed were Chinese yuan and US dollars. Family members of high-ranking officers sometimes slipped us bribes in secret when they brought their relatives in for treatment. Please, take good care of my father, they'd say, pressing an envelope into my hand. My conscience ached, but this was the only way I could try to stay alive. Over 6 months, we managed to save about 3,000 yuan. It wasn't a fortune, but we were told it was enough to at least start the escape. Then we memorized the route. We stared at a map that Dr. Ri had brought back from China, until we knew every line by heart. From Musan in North Hamgyong province, cross the Tumen River into Tumen City in China, meet the broker there, then head south, through Laos or Thailand, and finally to the South Korean embassy. What happens if we fail? I asked. We get shot, he answered. It was a short exchange, but the weight of it was crushing. We chose November 2017 as our time to go. just before winter fully set in, when the water level in the river would be low. We also needed a believable excuse to get leave from the hospital. My father is ill. I need to visit my family home in Chongjin, I said. To make that lie more convincing, we even forged a medical certificate. The final step was erasing my traces. I tore up all my diaries and flushed the pieces down the toilet. I buried the USB drive in the dirt. I ripped up our family photos as well. That was the hardest part. My father, my mother, my younger brother. Faces I knew I would probably never see again. Tears ran down my cheeks. But I gritted my teeth and kept going. I'm sorry, but I want to live. I whispered those words as I burned the photos. Watching the smoke curl up, it felt like my past was burning away with it. The night before my departure, I went up to the hospital rooftop. Far in the distance, I could see the lights of Pyongyang. They were beautiful, but they felt ice cold. Goodbye to the world I used to know. That was my final farewell. The next morning, I took off my uniform and put on ordinary civilian clothes. The person reflected in the mirror looked like a stranger. She was no longer a nurse officer named Park Jin-hee. She was a nameless fugitive who had thrown away her identity. The train was headed for Chongjin, but my real destination lay beyond that, on the other side of the border. In my small bag, clutched tightly in my hand, I carried money, a change of clothes, and photographs of the patient list. From the special ward, that was my proof, and the reason I absolutely had to survive. The Tumen River was closer than I had imagined. On the night of November 15, 2017, in a small village near Musan, the place the broker had designated was an abandoned shack by the river. Wait here, we move at 11, he said. His voice was low and cold. I didn't have the luxury of wondering whether I could trust him. There was no turning back now. We waited in the darkness. My heartbeat sounded so loud. I was afraid someone outside might hear it. My palms were slick with sweat, and my legs wouldn't stop shaking. I wasn't alone. There were 5 other people besides me. No one met anyone else's eyes. Remembering each other's faces would only be dangerous. Let's go. At the broker's signal, we stood up. We slipped out of the shack and walked along a mountain path. It was a moonless, suffocatingly dark night. Even the sound of our own footsteps felt terrifying. I don't know how long we walked. Eventually, I heard the sound of running water. The Tumen River. Don't run. Go in slowly. No splashing. No noise, the broker whispered. Cold. That word doesn't even begin to describe it. It was like blades of ice were slicing into my skin. The water came up to my waist. Slippery stones shifted under my feet. Every step felt like a step through hell. I held my breath, swallowing the scream rising in my throat. Then, suddenly, a searchlight swept across the surface of the river. Down. At the broker's shout, I threw myself under the water. The beam of the searchlight passed slowly right above my head. I thought my heart would burst. Time itself seemed to stop. All I could do was pray that the light would move on. Please, please. 10 seconds felt like 10 minutes. Finally, the light disappeared. Now, move. We pushed through the water again. I could just make out the riverbank on the Chinese side. Almost there, just a little further. Bang! A gunshot rang out. Someone screamed behind me. I wanted to look back, but I couldn't. The broker yanked hard on my arm. Run, don't stop. We scrambled up the riverbank. My nails tore, my knees scraped on the rocks. But I didn't have the luxury of feeling pain. Another gunshot echoed behind us. The sound seemed to chase after us through the dark. At last, my feet touched Chinese soil. My breath was ragged, and I thought I might collapse. But I couldn't stop. We plunged into the forest. Branches slapped my face. Stones jabbed into the soles of my feet. Still, I ran. After about 10 minutes, the broker finally stopped. That's far enough. You're safe for now, he said. At his words, my legs gave out beneath me. My whole body was shaking. Water dripped steadily from my soaked clothes. What about the others? I asked. They're dead. One of them got caught, he replied, flatly. My chest tightened. People whose names I never even learned. People who had crossed the river beside me. There was no time to mourn them. I wasn't safe yet. I had set foot on Chinese soil. But this was not the free world. In a different way, this was another kind of prison. In truth, this was only the beginning. China was a prison of another sort. After crossing the river, the broker took me to a farmhouse on the outskirts of Tumen. Stay here for 2 days. Wait until I contact you again, he said. It was like an old storage shed. The air smelled damp, and I could hear rats scurrying around. There were no windows, just darkness. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, trying to keep the cold from sinking into my bones. My wet clothes wouldn't dry, and the shivering wouldn't stop. Not even a single blanket. Leaning against the wall, all I could do was wait for time to pass. I'm alive. I made it across. I repeated that to myself, over and over. But the fear was still greater than the relief. If the Chinese police found me, I would be sent back to North Korea. And being sent back meant a political prison camp, or a firing squad. 2 days turned into a week. The broker never showed. The food began to run out. The old woman who owned the house brought me a bowl of cold rice once a day. You need to leave soon. If you stay too long, I'll get in trouble, she said. She was scared too. If they discovered she was hiding a North Korean defector, she would face heavy fines. Or even worse, at night, I was tormented by nightmares. Searchlights, gunshots, the screams of people slipping under the water. When I woke up, my whole body was drenched in sweat. I couldn't even cry out loud. I pressed my hand over my mouth and shook in silence. On the morning of the 10th day, another broker finally appeared. If you want to go south, you'll need another $3,000, he said. What? That's not what we agreed on. Things have changed. Security's tighter now. No money, you stay here, he said. His tone almost a threat. But I had no choice. I handed over everything I had. I'll pay you back when I get to South Korea. Please just help me, I begged, dropping to my knees and bowing my head. I had thrown my pride away long ago. We hid in the back of a truck and headed south. I wasn't the only one in the darkness. There were 6 other defectors. All of them were women. All of them had the same fear in their eyes. It's still better than being sold off to a Chinese man, one woman whispered beside me. From her words, I finally understood. How many North Korean women are trafficked in China, forced into marriage, forced into sexual exploitation. There was another kind of hell here too. For about a week, we traveled south, changing from trucks to buses. Always hidden. Guangzhou, Kunming, and border towns whose names I never learned. We could barely use proper toilets. And we had no way to wash. Even when I could smell my own body, I had no energy left to care. One night, the broker told us, tomorrow we cross into Laos. From there, the Koreans will help you. We're almost there. Just hold on. Somewhere far away, I felt as if I could see a tiny light of hope. Small, but real. I pressed my hands together and prayed. I had never had any religion. But in that moment, I desperately wanted to cling to someone, something. Please just let me make it there alive. When we crossed the border into Laos, it felt like I could finally breathe again. It was January 2018. In a small town in northern Laos, a group of people sent by a South Korean Christian organization met us there. You've been so brave. You're safe now, one of them said to us in Korean. The moment I heard those words, my tears burst forth like a broken dam. Everything I had been holding in collapsed at once. The shelter was warm. I was able to take a hot shower. For the first time in a month, I washed properly. The face in the mirror looked like someone else's. My cheeks were gaunt, my hair a tangled mess. But I was alive. To reach the South Korean embassy, you'll have to go through Thailand, one of the missionaries explained. From Laos to Bangkok in Thailand. And there, we would ask the South Korean embassy for protection. That would be the final gate. 2 days later, we boarded a bus heading for Bangkok. This time, we didn't have to hide in the back of a truck. We sat in regular seats like ordinary travelers, and looked out at the passing scenery. There were things I'd never seen before. Palm trees, temples, people walking freely wherever they wanted. This was the outside world. On the day we arrived in Bangkok, I stood in front of the South Korean embassy. The Taegukji, the South Korean flag, fluttered in the wind. The moment I saw it, my legs almost gave out. That's where I'm supposed to go, I thought. At the same time, I was suddenly afraid to take that first step. Could I really trust them? Was it really safe? Even so, I pushed the gate open. "Please help me. I'm a defector from North Korea," I said. A staff member from the consular section came out to greet me. "Please, have a seat. Take your time, it's all right," he said gently. His voice was so kind. I poured out everything I had been forced to keep locked inside my chest. The 105th hospital. The special ward. The children. My escape. I showed them the photos I had brought as evidence. "You've gone through so much. You're safe now. The Republic of Korea will protect you," they told me. At those words, for the first time, I understood what safety felt like. Beyond the door, I had risked my life to reach. Freedom was waiting. The process was not simple. They checked my identity, interviewed me, prepared documents. It took about a month. During that time, I stayed in a small facility near the embassy. Every day, I looked out the window. At the street below, people walking without fear, people laughing as they talked. I realized this was what normal was supposed to be. At last, they handed me a plane ticket. "Your flight to Seoul is tomorrow at 10 a.m. When you arrive at Incheon Airport, officials from the Ministry of Unification will be waiting for you." The ticket in my hands felt like something from a dream. Was I really, finally, going to South Korea? That night, I was so nervous and excited that I couldn't sleep at all. The next morning, we went to the airport. I passed through departure control and walked to the gate. I boarded the plane and sat down by the window. As I watched, the aircraft began to move. Then it took off. As it climbed into the sky, tears welled up again. The passenger sitting next to me stared, surprised. But I didn't have the energy to care. I was flying. I was flying toward freedom. I will never forget the day I arrived at Incheon International Airport. It was February 15, 2018. Around 11 a.m., I got off the plane and walked into the arrivals hall. There, a representative from the Ministry of Unification stood holding a sign with my name on it. "Are you Ms. Park Jin-hee? Welcome," he said. At those words, the tears came again. "Is this really the Republic of Korea?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "Welcome home." The word homeland still felt a little distant, like it belonged to someone else. But the sound of it was warm. I spent the next 3 months at Hanawon, a resettlement center for North Korean defectors. There, I received all kinds of education to help me live in South Korean society. Economy, law, culture, everything was new to me. How to use a credit card, how to ride the subway, how to use a smartphone. I learned them one by one. "Here, it's okay to ask questions. You can speak freely," the counselor told me, but it wasn't easy to speak. I had been trained for 28 years to stay silent. Even so, little by little, I began to use my own voice. "Excuse me, I have a question," I found myself saying. Something inside me was slowly changing. What shocked me the most was the big supermarkets. The first time I went to one, I was overwhelmed. Endless aisles of goods, people freely picking up what they wanted and putting it in their carts. Price tags on each item, and a system where you just pay at the register. "Are all of these real?" I asked. I knew it sounded absurd, but it was a sincere question. In North Korea, we had rationing, and the markets were always short of everything. At night, I walked through the streets of Seoul. Bright neon signs, safe roads, even late at night. People laughing freely. In that country, asking questions was a crime. Here, conversation was freedom. In that country, we were always being watched. Here, it was safe to walk alone. I started looking for work. It took time for my nursing qualifications to be recognized. So at first I worked as a nursing assistant in a hospital. "Jin-hee, could you check this patient's blood pressure?" my colleagues would ask. Each time they did, I silently gave thanks. Here, I was just an ordinary medical worker. This was nothing like that secret ward. Here, I could use my skills to help innocent patients. Even so, at night the nightmares continued. Searchlights, gunshots, the children in the special ward. I would wake up, soaked in sweat, but when I opened the window, the air that flowed in was the air of freedom. "I'm safe. I'm not there anymore," I told myself, until eventually I could fall asleep again. It has been a year now. since I came to South Korea. I live alone in a tiny one-room apartment. It's small, but it is my space. I can choose what I want to eat, what I want to watch, what I want to read. These ordinary things are miracles to me. Sometimes, I think about them. The children in the special ward. The people who fell on the way while crossing the river with me. The countless others still left behind in North Korea. Why am I here? I believe the reason is to tell their story. Freedom doesn't come for free. Someone once said that, and they were right. This freedom stands on top of countless sacrifices. I also risked my life to get here. That's why this freedom is more precious to me than anything. Every single day feels like a gift. Thank you for listening until the end. This is my story, the story of Park Jin-hee. No, of just Jin-hee, as I'm called now. A former North Korean defector. A human being who risked everything to reclaim the simple right to live an ordinary life. I survived, and I testify. The truth cannot be hidden forever. I pray that someday the day will come when everyone can be free. Thank you.